Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Given a few minutes this morning to let everyone get settled and come on in. Hi, it's good to see some people we know. It's good to see people we don't know too, always. Welcome, welcome. I'm always interested and excited to see who shows up for our CQI webinars. I know who's showing up for the practice webinars, right? Like, where's my eval people? Where's my data people in the world? I'm always looking for you. So glad you made it. Like I said, we'll give it just a minute for everyone to come in, get settled, and then we will do some introductions, introduce our speakers. While we're waiting, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, say hi. So give us your name, where you're from, what your role is, and then what are you doing for Halloween? Are you like out with your kids? Are you home handing out candy, locking that door? Pop it in chat. Who are you? Where are you from? What you doing for Halloween? Hopefully eating chili. I love that, Amy.
I don't want to commit yet.
Right? It's too far. Yep, I'm with you. We're theoretically gonna be walking and getting candy for a short time and then gonna come back and hand it out. My son's like real excited about the part where we hand the candy out this year. I don't, it's kind of cute. He's like, I don't need to go get it. I want to hand it out. I want to give it. It's pretty neat.
Oh, that's maturity right there.
Right? All grown up. Oof, the Dodgers. Yeah,
I like all these
those guys.
ideas.
Yeah, this is great. All right, that's awesome.
Oh, the three
Fire
dogs
pit.
as UPS delivery dogs.
Cute.
That's great.
Oh, that's lovely. Somebody said by the fire pit, and it just reminded me that last year in Halloween when we were walking around, we were like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna get a fire pit and all the things." And I'm like, "Oh geez, I guess I have some more stuff to do. Now we need a
Yeah.
fire pit."
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. Well, our numbers are slowing down as far as people joining, so we can go ahead and get started. Again, good morning, everyone. Welcome. You are at our Evaluation CQI Wraparound webinar. My name is Rebecca Cox. I am a wraparound specialist here at the Resource Center for Family Focused Practice, and I will have my partners in crime come in and introduce themselves. Donna, you want to start?
Good morning, everyone. I am Donna Lynch, Wraparound Peer Partner Program Specialist. So happy to be here. I will pass it over to Tamara. Good morning, Tamara. Is Tamara not in yet? All right, I will pass it over to James. James, say good morning to all the kind people.
Good morning, everybody. Here to serve your technical needs.
Thanks, James. James is the webinar host of with the hostess. I can't even think of what I'm trying to say. James is
Hostess
amazing.
with
Who
the
hosts all of our
mostest.
websites. Yep, that's that. There it is. Thank you. James is our guy. So that was the subtle way of being like, I'm amazing and I make all of the webinars happen at UC Davis. So thanks, James. Glad you're here. Glad you're always here to support us. All right. And then I will pass it to Chris to introduce the CDSS team.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Glad to be here this morning. Chris Petty, CDSS with the Wraparound Integrated Practice and Support Unit. I think that's the first time I've actually said that in one breath. So kudos to me, a wraparound consultant, and I will pass it over to Amy Bailey.
Good morning, everyone. Amy Bailey. I am a wraparound consultant with CDSS and glad to see everyone here. I did see one comment of someone who's having a hard time hearing. So just let us know if anyone else is having trouble hearing this morning.
Absolutely. All right. Chris, do you want to start off the webinar just by telling us a little bit of an update about the CQI pilot process?
Sure, absolutely. I want to give just a little bit of an overview for you all in case you're not familiar, as well as an update. So, it's the California Wraparound Evaluation and CQI pilot. So, CDSS, we established a contract with the University of Washington Wraparound Evaluation Research Team, often referred to as WORT. The focus of this pilot is to demonstrate what is reasonable to require of counties and wraparound providers regarding wraparound fidelity tools, CQI practices, all that sort of thing. So CDSS, WIRT, UC Davis Resource Center for Family Focused Practice began working in partnership, and we started the CQI pilot in September of 2023. Participants in the pilot are using the wraparound fidelity tools developed by the WORT team, which consist of the team observation measure, often referred to as the TOM, the document assessment and review tool, that is also called the DART, and then the Wraparound Fidelity Index short form, the WIFI-EZ. So the goals within the CQI pilot to support California's system of care coordination for youth and families with complex needs and permanency needs through more consistent monitoring of four components: fidelity, quality, satisfaction, and outcomes. And so we're working towards the development of a statewide CQI and evaluation plan. The pilot's going to test that plan once we've developed it, and then develop final recommendations and decision making about the statewide wraparound CQI and evaluation plan. So currently, the pilot is gathering data entered by the pilot participants into the wraparound fidelity and assessment system with support from the University of Washington work team. And we're beginning to develop the process of comparing the data that we have within the state system of CWS CMS with the data that's been collected in the WORT wraparound fidelity and assessment system. So all of this work will lead to a testing of a statewide wraparound CQI and evaluation plan. So at the very beginning stages of collecting some data, and which we're very excited about. So that's the latest with the CQI pilot.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. All right. With all of that, I'd like to introduce our speaker this morning. We have, oh, Brian, I see your hand up. Did you have a question about the pilot?
I had a question about the assessment system. I was wondering whatever happened to the CSWI, the Community Supports for Wraparound Initiative. That was originally one of the four tools in the WFAS. And it seems like that would still be important, especially for the certification process where, in the, I think standard 7 or 8 has, the community support issues in it. So is that tool, did that just go away? We're not going to use that at all? Or?
That is a great question, Brian. So it still exists and it's still an option for us and something that's on the work team's radar, CSS's and UC Davis's radar. It's just not something we're currently testing in the pilot. So that doesn't mean, I mean, as we do the pilot, we're kind of exploring what makes sense for California, what's this going to look like, how do we want to connect the dots, and also look at how do we also want to make sure it's not so burdensome that we do anything and everything under the sun. So it's not that it's gone away, it's just not something we're currently testing as we start out with the other measures and looking at the more directly on the practice measures of the WIFI and the TOM and the DART. So it could change in the future. It might be something out there, but absolutely does exist. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to kick it over to Tyler to introduce himself. Tyler is one of our instructors here at UC Davis, and he is always the guy I'm like, hey, Tyler, we have a question about evaluation or data processes, or what if we do this, right? He's our like at least my check and balance. Am I crazy to think that this is a good idea? So Tyler, go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Good to see everybody. I see some new faces and some familiar faces. And yeah, thank you for the nice introduction. My name's Tyler Stickney. I'm an instructor for UC Davis, and I also serve as Director of Data and Outcomes for a provider in California that provides wraparound, a bunch of other human services as well as wraparound, but wraparound's a large portion of that. And I teach statistical analysis for Cal Baptist University. So I love all things evaluation, all things data, all things analysis. Not all things. All things is a strong word. There's a lot of analysis I don't like. But everything we're talking about today, which are the wraparound standards for California high fidelity wraparound certification, what we're going to do today is really just kind of look at the standards and break it down into kind of small bite-sized chunks, because any type of large project or large change management initiative, really, they say, how do you eat a whale? Well, you do it one bite at a time, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to break that down into kind of small pieces, and then kind of talk about what are some practical steps you can do as you're going through and getting your wraparound program certified, and how do you meet all of the evaluation standards that exist. So in terms of the group size and in terms of the of questions and stuff like that, if you have a question, drop it in the chat, because we only have 2 hours together. So if there's anything that you need clarified or you want questions answered, drop it in the chat, and then I'll let all of the people from CDSS and UC Davis, if it's worth, if it makes sense to say, hey, let's stop here and kind of go off on a tangent, CDSS and Davis folks in here, feel free to cut me off and, talk about that question. I probably won't be looking at the chat because it's like a constant feed for me right now. And if it's something that maybe we can cover at the end, I will leave time at the end, and we'll have some question and answer time as well as that. So what we'll do, let me pull this up right here. We're gonna do this, and we're gonna share my screen. Okay. Quick thumbs up. Everyone can see. It should say building an evaluation plan. Great, thumbs up. Okay. So let's hop, hang on a second. Let's hop right in here. Okay, so quick covering of learning objectives today. What we're going to do is we're going to understand the data expectations outlined in the California wraparound standards. What are the actual expectations? There's been, over the last several years, if you've been kind of following along the development process, if you've participated in that development process, some things that are in the standards today were not in the standards previously, and there were things in draft standards previously that are not in the standards today. So we're going to kind of break down what is the current state of those standards. We're going to look at a roadmap for building an effective evaluation and data plan. Step one, step two, step three, we're going to break all of that down for everybody. And looking at strategies for actually using that data to provide timely, actionable feedback to staff. So we are going to talk about collecting, but also you have all this information, and maybe you've been collecting it, maybe you haven't. But a lot of times what happens is we collect it for compliance reasons, and then we kind of underutilize it. So we have this, wealth of information. We say data is the currency of 2025, right? But we have this wealth of information, and we don't quite use it as much as we really could use it, and we should be using it. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to look at wraparound specific considerations for program and outcome measurement. So quite a bit to cover today, but it should be pretty good. The slides I'm going to be sharing today on here in the information, I will drop that into the chat for everybody. And so I'll drop that along with any other materials that I go over. Right before the end, I'll put it so everybody can have a copy of it if you want to go back and review it. So California wraparound standards, it's not new, but I don't want to assume everyone's kind of on the same page. You may be in this meeting and kind of wondering what's the context of what we're talking about. So the California high fidelity wraparound standards, they ensure that minimum standards exist for high fidelity wraparound. And so it's saying if you're doing what you're calling California high fidelity wraparound, it has to meet certain criteria to fall under that definition. And so entities providing wraparound can obtain high fidelity wraparound certification, which is a little bit what we're talking about today. Starting in July of 2026, as of right now, the certification is required for the aftercare wraparound component. So that would be the STRTP aftercare. Kids are in STRTP. There's a requirement that there's what is it, 6 months of aftercare provided, and that certification is going to be required for that component and those providers of that. And so today we're talking about this. The standards, they do contain provisions for program evaluation. It's not just program evaluation. There's a lot of other stuff in the standards as well. But today's focus is going to be specifically on the area of data collection, reporting, program evaluation component. So what is the data component of these standards, and how can you successfully obtain certification in that dimension? And I know there's some other webinars that have been done in the past. There's probably some ones scheduled for the future to kind of break down other pieces of that certification. Okay, so let's jump right in. If you want to access these standards, you can go here. This link is going to be at the top of the PowerPoint, and you can go into this toolkit. It has a copy of the standards. That's where you can also access the portal and start the certification process and start filling out the certification forms and stuff like that. So you can get to it right there. The evaluation components, so if we go through the current version of the standards, we can break out the evaluation components kind of as follows in two different areas. There's collecting data. So there are specific types of information that you need to be collecting and obtaining about the wraparound process. And that's kind of what we're going to start with today. And then the second component is actually using that data in specific ways. So today everything we're talking about falls into one of these two buckets: collecting the data and then using it. And of course, we're talking about collecting data, and I'll spend kind of quite a bit of time talking about this because oftentimes, if you're in a data analytics role or CQI role or any type of information systems role, you already know this, but the data collection is the hardest part about it. A lot of the times, the fun part is we do the analysis and we do the data visualization and we communicate what's happening. And all of that is very interesting and fun, but it can never happen if you don't have the data. The painstaking process is actually gathering and storing that information in a way that you can actually use it. And so that's why it's worth taking some time to kind of talk about this morning. So we're gonna hop right into that. Within the collecting data domain, we can really look at it in three different areas. And the first one is demographics. So we do have to collect demographic information on our programs. And really that's who's being served. So it's answering the question, who is actually receiving wraparound services and what are the characteristics of those people receiving services from us. The second area of data collection is fidelity. We have to be measuring fidelity, which is the wraparound model occurring. So we're measuring, we have the principles of wraparound, and wraparound is a very, very specific thing. And so we should be and must be under certification measuring, is that model being followed? And really to what degree is it being followed? Because it's not always just a yes or no. We're doing, we have fidelity or we don't have fidelity. It's to what degree do we have fidelity? And we'll kind of break that up today as well. And then the third area is going to be outcomes, which is what is wraparound's impact? So if we're collecting data under certification, it's going to be these three areas: demographics, fidelity, and outcomes. So collecting data, using data. On the right side, if we're talking about using data, we can break that up into two different areas. And the first one is going to be the continuous quality improvement. And so that is really ongoing local review of collected data and participation in statewide data collection efforts. So it's a little bit of a misnomer in the standards, is my opinion, because the second component, which is informed program practice, is using that data collected to improve services. That's really also a CQI component. So I put these as the headers of these two areas: the continuous quality improvement and the informed program practice. But under the standard for informed program practice, which we're going to break down, that contains a lot of local CQI that individual provider organizations, anybody providing wraparound service, is going to implement. But really, if we're talking about how do the standards indicate that we must use our data collected, it's going to be in these two areas. So a big part of that, Chris was talking just a minute ago about the statewide data collection efforts. Right now, it's in that pilot phase, but long term, there will be a county-wide participation. Anybody who is doing, certified high fidelity wraparound, there is a statewide strategy being developed and implemented that's going to be really looking at all of those data components, that the demographics, the fidelity, and the outcomes that we're doing there. So we got collecting data, and so that's that first area. And so in collecting data, again, we have demographics, we have fidelity, and we have outcomes. And using data, we have the continuous quality improvement component, and we have improved program practice component. So that's really what things look like. And the nice thing is that if you do the collecting data well, and you are, that first aspect of collecting the data that's required to be collected and measuring the things that are required to be measured, it pretty much takes care of the entire CQI component in using data. You're like 99% of the way there. If you can collect the demographics, fidelity, and outcomes, that feeds right into that requirement in what's section 10, and we'll break that down as well. So it's not it's a little bit of an overlap in the standards. If you look at it, that section 10.1 really contains everything for demographics, fidelity, and outcomes, and we'll jump in detail here. So under demographics, the standards do not specify which demographics should be collected. So the current standards don't specify which demographics should be collected. And we're gonna break that down a few times throughout today, because there are areas that are left open. And so the general concept of you have to collect this data, sometimes the standards are very specific about you have to measure it this way. If we talk about like timeliness of service is very specific. But a lot of times the general construct is indicated, but in terms of which demographics are collected, they aren't specified in there. What I will say though is at minimum, best practice, minimal demographics. I think you should collect a lot more than this, but minimal demographics collection is going to be race and ethnicity. So of those that you're serving, it's going to be sex or gender identity of those that you're serving. It's going to be the age of those of you're serving, and it's going to be the population. Are they child welfare? Are they probation? Are they mental health? What's the population? There's a lot more to the demographics that can be collected, especially if you're participating in, and there could be additional specific requirements in the future. I can't imagine that there won't, especially if I'm looking at things like the roster as part of the data pilot, and looking at things like reasons for referral and more specific aspects of the population. But I would say at minimum, collect these, and collect more if you'd like to. More is always more interesting, and it's a little bit more valuable because you can take all of your other data that you're collecting, so your fidelity data and your outcomes data, and you can split it by demographics if you want to look at things. You may say, hey, we have really high fidelity except for teenagers. Why is our fidelity so low with teenagers? And that's a very interesting question, and you can't even know that it's low only with teenagers if you're not collecting the age, for example. And so you could apply that to other things. So demographics, pretty basic. The question that I get a lot from people is, how do we actually do this where we don't have a system, or we don't have software that's going to allow us to track these things, or maybe we're using software but it doesn't have the features available to track these things. It's a very, very common thing. At this point, most people have some type of software. Not everybody. A lot of people maybe are using kind of generalized tools like Excel and Word and stuff like that. Other people might have NetSmart or Welligent or some electronic health record systems. Don't let that stop you, because you can go very, very rudimentary and basic with this stuff, and it's not that difficult. So if you have software and you can track it with this because you're doing other stuff with your software, absolutely use that software, and hopefully it has a reporting component that you can extract data out of it, and most of the good ones do. Not all of them have, I've never met anybody who just is in love with their software at work, right? I mean, it's going to have stuff it doesn't do. But at a very rudimentary level, if you don't have anything, I mean, this right here, this took me, I think, 3 minutes to put together. And really, it's an Excel sheet. And if every case that I get in my program, I give it a case number because I want a unique identifier. Who is it? In terms of storing age, I always tell everyone store their date of birth. You can always figure out their age later. If you store their age, the problem with that is when they were 9 years old and they came into your program, they're not 9 years old anymore. And so if you store it as the date of birth, you can always figure out their age. And then storing the race and ethnicity. If you want to, have some comments on things that might be other, give yourself a column for columns here. Gender identity, population, and you got your demographics right here. It's just an easy way. You have somebody who's in charge of this, and you make sure every case that comes in, they get a line item here, and just easy way to track this. I'm going to give you at the end of this sample. I'm going to kind of use this example in different ways. I'll give you this Excel sheet that I do at the end. I'm not saying that you can take that Excel sheet and when you do certification, you're saying, "Oh, I'm using Tyler's Excel sheet," and that's kind of the beginning and end of it, and you're kind of like, mission accomplished, right? I'm not saying that, but I'm saying it's a good guide if you're in a position where you're like, I don't even know where I would put this information. It's like a baby step, little, step one of, you can just throw it in here and you are tracking information in a central manner that's going to allow you to report on all of this stuff. So demographics, very basic. We're starting very basic today, but there you go. If there's more demographics that you want to track, maybe you want to track, aspects of education and what kind of education environment are they in, or anything like that, you can absolutely do that. And I would highly recommend that you do. I've found the more information, especially if it's available, if I'm getting referral packets or some type of intake information and that information's available anyway, it's really great if I record it because I've never regretted it. I always regret having less information and not more. So, okay, now we're going to move into fidelity.
Tyler,
And
can
the
I,
first component of fidelity in the standards is going to be timely engagement and planning. And that's very specifically operationally defined. And it's defined as the first contact is within 10 days of the referral. The first plan of care is within 30 days of the referral. The plan of care is reviewed every 30 to 45 days, and the plan of care is updated every 90 days. So if you're measuring timely engagement and planning, the standards indicate that this is what's defined as timely and not timely. So if your first contact is within 10 days, you're timely. If you're outside of that 10 days, you're less timely. And so this, under fidelity, this is the only measure of fidelity that is specifically operationalized in the standards. And by that, I mean there's a specific definition and objective way of measuring it. Other than that, everything else is not operationalized by the standards. And so what I mean by that is all of these constructs of fidelity, which are going to be, is wraparound led by the youth and the families? Is it strength-based? Is it needs-driven? Is it individualized? Is there a use of natural and community supports? Is it culturally respectful and relevant? Is there high-quality team planning and problem solving? Is it an outcomes-based process? Is there persistence? And are transitions, is there a transition process and for case closures where, there's a definition of that. But so those constructs are not specifically operationalized by the standards. And so you would need to indicate, how do you plan on measuring these things? How do you plan on measuring how strength-based your program is? We're going to talk in a bit about what I would recommend because others have done it before, and many of you are measuring these things right now. We don't need to reinvent the wheel at all. But just know that you're going to have to make a decision of how you actually measure these different constructs of fidelity. And so all of these things on here, all of these green squares are measuring to what degree are we actually following the wraparound model, and to what degree are we not. If I didn't have an EHR system to track these things, what would I do? Well, I'm not going to just not get certified. What I would do is I'd throw that sucker in Excel. So this is kind of the first part here. By the way, if I have my mouse on my screen, can you see this? If I'm moving this, I just want to make sure. Okay, because I'm going to point to some stuff. So on here, under my timely engagement section, I kind of scrolled over. These are all screenshots, but I'll send you my file at the end. But if I just, every case comes in and I put in my demographics information, I can just put in, hey, here's my referral date. Here's my first contact date. Was first contact within 10 days of the referral? If you want to get ultra fancy, you could do a formula and it just kind of auto calculates, right? What was my first plan of care date? Was that within 30 days of the referral? And then, plan of care review 1, plan of care review 2, et cetera, et cetera. I ran out of space on the right, so we're coming down here at the bottom, but, was the plan of care reviewed every 45 days? And then, here's my update 1, update 2, update 3, update 4. You could put a column for update 5, and was it updated every 90 days? It is not that difficult if when things happen, you go through and you just update this, right? So you have, each place can do it a different way. I'm not saying, my recommendation is not, oh, you should use Excel to do this. What I'm showing this as is if you don't have any other option, you can absolutely be extremely successful with certification, because this is a perfectly fine way to track information. My recommendation is do it as it happens. So, if I were responsible for doing this and, I was tracking it this way, I would, every Friday, send out an email with a bunch of questions. Hey, did you have any plan of care? Who had a plan of care? Send that back in. If you're a smaller agency, it's going to be a lot easier to track this stuff. If you're larger, it's a little bit more difficult because there's always constantly plan of care reviews happening. There's constantly new cases being added and discharged and stuff like that. But you can still absolutely do it. I see a lot of a lot of people, and I have a lot of conversations where people do feel a little bit paralyzed, and they feel that a lack of technological infrastructure is going to stop them from doing any of this stuff. Don't let it stop you. Even if you're not sure, you can start with this, and then you can always move it into something more sophisticated if you're working on updating your technology systems or things like that. So timely engagement, you can absolutely measure. Sorry, pretty easy. All right. The other aspects, the other fidelity indicators, however you decide to measure them, you're going to have to come up with some type of fidelity score for each of those areas. Again, if I'm going low tech, I can put in what's my score for led by youth and families, what's my strength-based score, what's my needs-driven score, what's my individualized score, what's my use of natural community support score, et cetera, et cetera. You can plug them in here. Now on here, I have scores for everyone. We'll talk about this in a second. You can absolutely sample your cases, and you may actually, it may actually be better to sample your cases instead of trying to obtain fidelity scores for every single case. And so I would recommend developing some type of sampling plan. And so if you did that, you'd have a lot of blank spaces here, but you would take a random sample, every so often, every month, every quarter, something like that. And you would say, okay, we have a method of measuring how strength-based we're doing. We're going to sample, 10% or 20% of our cases, or 5%. It's going to depend on your program size, but we're going to sample that and we're going to measure it however we decided to measure it. And we're going to record those scores there. So you can absolutely do that. But any of these things that aren't specifically defined, what I would recommend is figure out how you're going to measure them. I'll give you a cheat sheet in a minute. Kind of spoiler alert, the easy part is coming, right? But once you figure out how to measure it, you need to be recording those scores. And my thing that I recommend very, very highly is keep your scores with your cases, so that these are all fictitious names, by the way. But Owen here, if I know that Owen had a strength-based score when I, sampled him of 88. It's really good to line up all your data per case because otherwise you're not able to do things like split that data by your demographics. And so a common pitfall that I see people make is that they keep everything separate. And so they have all this data on fidelity, but they're not matching it to each of their cases. And so they can't really do a lot more with it. Or maybe you want to match it to who the care coordinator was or for what division it was. Maybe you have multiple offices and you want to look at, the fidelity performance across multiple places. You can't do that unless you're matching everything with the case. If you're storing it like this, you can always aggregate it later. It's a lot harder to de-aggregate it. Okay, now we're into outcomes, third component of data collection. Outcomes are also not operationalized by the standards. The standards do not indicate how you must measure the outcomes. And so what are the actual outcomes? Youth and family satisfaction. So to what degree is the youth and their family satisfied with the services that are being provided to them? Is there improved school functioning? Is there improved functioning in the community? Is there improved interpersonal functioning? Is there increased caregiver confidence? Is there a stable and least restrictive environment? Is there a reduction in inpatient emergency behavioral health visits? And is there a reduction in crisis visits? Is there a positive exit from wraparound? So nine outcomes that you're going to have to indicate. How do I measure if there's increased caregiver confidence? How do I measure if there's improved school functioning? Maybe you have a scale for that, maybe you don't today. Again, we're going to break that down. But all of these things that standards do not indicate you have to do it this way. Again, I'm going to tell you the path of least resistance and easiest way in just a second. But nine actual outcomes, and these are all measuring what is the actual impact of wraparound. And so not too bad. Let's pull this up as just an example. Again, if I'm measuring these things, I can develop a score for youth satisfaction, plug that right in, line it up with all my cases. I have this hidden here, but imagine everything else is here. I'll show you my full worksheet in a second. But I'm giving this to everybody as a sample because, again, each case, if you have your outcome, hey, was there improved school functioning? And any one of these things, there's different ways of measuring them, right? So youth and family satisfaction, maybe you're sampling everybody and getting that satisfaction. Improved school functioning, maybe you're doing a pre-test, post-test type thing. Maybe you're saying, what was the school functioning at intake? What's the school functioning at discharge or at some type of point in time? And computing a change score in a type of kind of like a within subjects design where you're looking at pre-test, post-test. But you don't have to, right? You could measure if there's improved school functioning without a pre-test, post-test, and we'll talk more about that as well. So don't let anything stop you if you feel like, well, how do I track all of this stuff? This is how I would do it if I had no other tools. I'd put it in here and it would get done. So, and then, you can always improve it in the future. All right. So quick note, demographics, they have to be collected from 100% of the cases. You want to collect demographics from all of your cases. In terms of fidelity, it's okay to sample cases for fidelity. It's definitely okay to sample. You don't have to do it from all of them. What I would say is your timely engagement should be collected from 100% of your cases just because you're going to be tracking it anyway as things happen. So there's no reason not to be able to measure timely engagement from all of your cases. But again, sampling is fine. I would say measure it for all of them just because you might as well, especially if you're tracking it as it happens. Same thing with outcomes. It's okay to sample cases on your outcomes. You don't have to measure all of those outcomes for every single case or youth or family that you have. What I would say, though, is the positive exit data, collect that from everyone because you know why they're discharging. There's no reason not to, there's no reason to say, we only know the exit reason for 20% of our cases. You know why they're leaving. You're a part of it. Collect that for all of them. Just record what's the discharge reason, and you can indicate if that's a positive exit reason or not. Okay. All right. I'm going to take a breath before I move forward. From Davis or CDSS, is there anything, any burning questions in the chat that we should get to right now and it makes sense to get to, or anything you'd like me to clarify? Or if you want to do a fact check on me and I've said something completely off the rails, you can let me know that too. But I just want to kind of open the door for that really quickly before we press on forward.
Yeah, we've had a lot of questions about standard certification, so we're doing our best to kind of keep up and answer you all in the chat. So hang in there, patience with us. I think the big question that I was just typing out, and I'll just say it out loud for everybody, is really if your county's provider, we want you to focus on your individual processes and your individual roles. We understand those might cross, right? So if your provider and your county has a data plan and they have all these processes and all these things that you participate in, then when you submit that, tell us that, right? Say, this is the county process. This is how we participate. And then tell us how you use it. So we don't want to see like, one-way upload. Like we take data, we put it to the county, we never see it again, we never get feedback again, and we never think about it again,
Yeah.
right? We want it to actually be useful and helpful, something that you're using to inform and inform your program. So then if that's a gap, how are we filling that gap? What's it going to look like? Right. So either or, county or provider, really speaking to both on each end. And then questions for you, Tyler. We've had a bit of discussion in the chat about which demographics to uh, to measure, right? And specifically race and ethnicity. Should that be two separate items? Should that be one item? Curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so I've changed my opinion on it over the years. It's a great question. Race is, you can look at the typical categories, but ethnicity is typically, this is kind of an inaccurate fundamental definition, but I'll give you more of the practical definition that everybody's using for ethnicity, which is either is the individual Hispanic or Latino, or are they not Hispanic or Latino? That's typically how you see the ethnicity dimension measured. Now you can argue, ethnicity is more deep than that, but I'm just telling you, everywhere that you see ethnicity, it's going to be that. And so the question is do we measure that distinctly from race? And the different race categories that exist, which again, they're going to vary. Typically, you're going to get for race, you're going to get Asian, Black or African American, Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, Native American or Alaska Native, white, and then multiracial or other are usually options that we see now. And so the question is do we put Hispanic or Latino under it and call it race/ethnicity and just put that as a category with Asian, Black, or African American, Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, Native American, Alaska Native, or white? I used to track it separately. In a lot of ways, I still track it separately. Typically, what I do is I track it separately. When I report it, I squash those together, and I'm just telling you what I found to be the most effective and have the least questions about it. Is when I report it, oftentimes the categories where I have to report it are squashed together. And so if someone identifies as Hispanic or Latino, I put that as their race or ethnicity. If they're non-Hispanic or Latino, I put whatever they put for race. And the reason I do that is just in a lot of conversations that I've had with people along the way, they're perfectly fine with somebody who's Hispanic or Latino and puts white, they're going to identify more as Hispanic or Latino in most cases. And so that's kind of how I do that. Is there a universal definition for this? No. But yeah, I'd say track it separate. And then when you report it, you're often going to combine it together is what could happen. You can also track it together. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't lose sleep over it though. It's a good question.
Totally. Thank you.
Okay.
We
Anything
have
else?
a follow-up
Yep.
on that question right now.
Yep.
Yeah. So how do you report someone who is Hispanic or Latino and Black or African American?
I would record that as multiracial and put that in the comments. And
Mhm.
yeah.
And I think really the point is looking at your individual program. This is why we didn't specify out and say you have to measure exactly this, right? So we're saying make it make sense for you. So if you're like, wow, we have a huge population of multiracial kids and we want to be able to break that down and look at different combinations and different things, then that's how you set up your data. If you're looking at like broader, bigger pictures, then it's, then you're probably looking at lumping together anyway. And so you can do that. So I think it's really is just be mindful about what is the purpose of the data collection I'm thinking about?
Yeah.
What am I going to use this data for? And how's that going to look on the back end? So, I've worked with Tyler and the program director at his place, Annabelle, who, they have the conversations that'll say, hey, I want to know this about the kids. Well, then that might change how we're doing our data, right? Or Tyler's really good at being like, well, I know in general you want to measure demographics, but I know the type of questions you ask on a weekly basis in our meetings is this. So I'm actually going to set your data up this way. We're attempting to give you that flexibility to do that on your own rather than say do exactly this and then you're back like, oh, that doesn't apply to us. That doesn't make sense, right? So I think it really, it's a lot of these are really about getting inside your county, your organizations, and have those conversations about what makes sense. And then if you have really detailed, like, let's get into the weeds, I'm not sure exactly what's right, reach out for technical assistance. We'll drop the link here in a second. Our team at Davis can sit down and we could even pull Tyler in and we can sit and have a conversation about what does that look like? What makes sense for your organization again? Yeah. The
Yeah.
other question we had, Tyler, you got more time for one more?
We got time for one more. Yeah,
All right.
definitely. And we'll have time at the end for some more as well. Yeah.
Sweet. Awesome. We've had a couple questions about how youth and family satisfaction counts as an outcome. And can you speak to that at all?
Yeah. So the fidelity versus the outcomes. The fidelity is what behaviors are you doing or not doing, and how close do those behaviors follow the wraparound model. The outcomes are what's the product of what are the things that you're doing or not doing. So whether someone is satisfied or not satisfied is considered an outcome because it's the result of, again, the things you're doing or the things you're not doing. And so that to me is why it would fall under, and I think it's a correct classification as outcome. Now the question is why does it matter? Or because people don't get wraparound, they don't get referred to wraparound because, hey, this family's so unsatisfied. The goal of wraparound is to increase satisfaction. That is not the goal of wraparound. However, satisfaction with anything is going to increase the effectiveness or benefit that you receive from it. Your satisfaction with today's training, if it's extremely low, I promise it's going to be a less effective training. If it's extremely high, you're going to feel like you've gotten, and there's reasons it's low or high, right? And it's not the end all be all because I could do a training and people enjoy it, but you don't learn anything. And I can do wraparound that people really enjoy. I mean, I could take a kid to Chuck E. Cheese every day and they may report high satisfaction. My fidelity might be low because I'm not, doing some other things that I should be doing. So it's not the end all be all, but it's really hard to get other good outcomes when satisfaction is low. When satisfaction is low, attendance is low. When satisfaction is low, participation is low, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of my view on that. Very important thing to measure though, whether you're doing wraparound or you're a company that sells basketballs. I mean, any domain satisfaction is absolutely, it's so important to be measuring. Okay, I know there's some more questions. I'm gonna hop back in, and we'll end our commercial break right now, and then we'll come back and talk about some more stuff. So let me bring this up. Wait a minute. Okay. All right, so moving into these items that are not operationalized by the standards. And it seems like a lot because we have all this fidelity data. And I put this number here. This is section 1 or chapter 1, or however you want to call it in the standards, but it's 1.2 through 1.11. There's no specific operationalization. Under outcome data 2.1 through 2.9, these are all the outcome data areas
Wow.
or constructs on here. So how do we measure these? How do we measure these? Because that seems like a heavy lift. If you're asking me, I got to figure out how to measure all of these things. It's not too bad because what we have is option A is you can acquire and develop scales to measure all of these constructs. You could do that. Option B is you can use the wraparound evaluation research team measures. There's other measures within this, but what I'm specifically talking about are the fidelity measures of Wi-Fi EZ, Tom2, and Dart. So we talked about these are part of the pilot project, and they encapsulate pretty much all of these constructs. And someone else has developed now measures that have been validated and researched, have data behind them, and they measure all of these things. You also have option 3, you can combine options A and B. So you can, again, if you have a specific way that you are measuring use satisfaction, because maybe you're a provider organization that does more than wraparound, and you have this standard approach to measuring use satisfaction, you can continue to measure it that way. I'll talk about some pros and cons of that. But really, I'm for me, I can't express strongly enough why I would say option B is the best. There may be some gaps in option B that you may need to supplement from stuff, but for the most part, option B is really going to be the easiest path forward. I'm not a commercial for University of Washington. I'm not part of that team or anything like that, but I have used all 3 of these measures, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about those. I took those measures and I broke them down into this grid. And so these are all the standards here. So these are all our fidelity measures. These are all our outcome measures. And then on the Wi-Fi EZ, the Tom, and the Dart, these are what the Wi-Fi EZ will measure for you, what the Tom will measure for you, what the Dart will measure for you. As a glance, I'm going to give you a caveat on this, so nobody screenshot it because I'm gonna cover it up in a second, and I'll tell you why. But as a general, just quick overview, the Wi-Fi EZ is a survey that can be given to the youth. It can be given to their caregiver and the care coordinator or facilitator or case manager. You might have different names for them. Can do it. And it's a survey that's asking them questions about the wraparound experience. It also has some questions at the end for different outcomes like satisfaction, like whether or not there was improved school functioning, like whether or not there's increased caregiver confidence. So the Wi-Fi EZ is nice because it's kind of like a double, wham bam, because it gets fidelity and it gets a lot of the outcome measures. Now the Wi-Fi EZ has no questions about was there a stable and least restrictive living environment. The Wi-Fi EZ does not capture whether there was a positive exit from high fidelity wraparound. So the Tom 2.0, that's an observational measure, and how that works is someone gets trained to be a Tom observer. It's not too difficult. They really should have a very good understanding of wraparound. So it should be someone who's done wraparound and understands the principles and the fidelity concepts, but they're trained. They get certified as a scorer. It's easy to get certified. You're watching some videos and you're actually asked to score them, and then it's almost like a test, like how well did you score those videos is kind of the process with it. But then what you do is with the Tom, the certified observer goes and they sit in on a child and family team meeting and they score it based off of several questions, and that's only a measure of fidelity. And so it'll pick up on these things. It's not going to pick up on any outcomes, but it picks up on these aspects of fidelity. And then the DART is the document assessment review tool. What you're looking at is the paper record of that case. So you're going through and you're looking at all the documentation for that case and you're scoring it. That's also going to pick up on fidelity, and it's going to pick up on the outcome, some of the outcome measures as well. Notice that timely engagement and planning, none of these measure this of the University of Washington measures here. The DART has a component for timely engagement and planning. It's slightly different than what's operationalized in the California standards, though. So if you want to say, according to the standards, are we meeting those, the timely engagement and planning? The DART will not necessarily give you that aspect of it because the timelines are just slightly different than what are in the standards. The other thing I would say, apart from most data collection items can be measured using these work measures, that's why I'm recommending them. I work for a provider organization. We're using these. We like them. The DART is great. It's just probably the most time consuming. Just, if you've done a DART, if you know, you know. But what you get out of it is really excellent. But I would say the DART is the hardest. After you do a few, I think it gets easier and you start to kind of set up your files and your information in a way that it probably makes that easier. But so the number one reason I would recommend these is most data collections can be measured using these University of Washington work team measures. Again, these measures, they've been validated. They're backed by published research. You can actually pull up and look at the validation papers that have been written on these and validated against other measures and looking at construct validity and things like that. There's also a huge multi-state community of other sites that use this. You have interagency support. I mean, even within California, the more people that use that, I mean, I've been a part of so many meetings where it's like, hey, what do you do here? Oh yeah, I do this. And we've done this and we can share and learn from each other. So we're not all doing something different. We can compare baselines, we can compare benchmark, we can look at trends between organizations because they're all using these. The third thing I will say, technical assistance from University of Washington is excellent. I would not say that for every measure. They're extremely good at if I'm saying, hey, we're struggling with this aspect of it, or, can you tell us, we think people are answering this question in this way, or when we're observing the TOM, or when we're, doing a DART, we're running into these issues. They have a lot of really smart and also very nice, and they have a lot of people there, right? So a lot of smart, nice people that are extremely helpful. And my experience with them has just been really nothing but excellent. So to me, I'm saying use these measures. It checks pretty much all of the boxes. I will tell you, for me, the concept of persistence, which we could break down, at the end if we have time, but there's a fidelity measure of persistence. I'm working with them right now to kind of indicate, do they think any of their measures actually measure the concept of persistence? Which again is, things aren't working, we're gonna, try something else. We're not gonna close a case because things aren't working. We're gonna persist despite setbacks. And when I was reviewing these, I could not see this construct measured by any of these three. This is kind of a TBD list. That's why I said don't bank on this quite yet. So I'm gonna call this a draft. And I've sent this over to University of Washington. They've given an initial pass through on it. And what they're going to work on is a little bit more in-depth feedback. So I have some mappings that they sent me and that they've done in the past. These components have changed slightly, I think, since they've done those mappings. So what my little caveat with this is you can do something like this, but I think what we'll do is we'll do a final version that we can say, like, with confidence, both we think that this construct can be measured here, and University of Washington is also saying that, because they're the ones who produce these measures, and they're saying that it's measured by that. And then I think for Davis and CDSS, we can get this out to everybody as a final. So I'm putting a little draft stamp on here, but this concept, pretty much use these measures. You could pretty much measure the fidelity and outcomes that you need. Okay. However you decide to collect your data, all of these sections here in section 1, this is an example of 1.3. This is what we're looking at is the actual certification tool that's online that you would fill out. Despite how you measure it, you have this section right here, which is going to be at the bottom, and it's feedback from families regarding their experience of strength-based, or fill in the blank, right? Outcomes based, or whatever our fidelity or outcome measure is. is routinely elicited through satisfaction surveys, use of Wi-Fi, TOM, quality assurance phone calls, etc., and used for quality improvement, including providing feedback to staff and their supervisors for training and coaching purposes. So you can't do the CQI, you can't provide feedback to staff, and you can't use it for training and coaching if you're not collecting it. So that's why we're talking first about collecting the data, because none of that is possible unless you actually have it and you're measuring it. So, but be prepared, and we're going to break this down a little bit more in terms of just know that all of these things, you're going to have to indicate how you might use that information, and that's kind of what we're going to get into next. But you have to have that information to do that. I know you're probably all looking at me and saying, well, it goes without saying, like, of course, but I see a lot of people wanting to do CQI and they don't have any data. I mean, it happened. It happened. I've done it too. I'm not exempting myself, right? I say, yeah, we're going to try to improve this. We're not even measuring anything yet. So you got to measure it first, and then you can move on and look at how do we actually want to use that. Okay. So back to our overview, we talked about collecting data. If you've collected all of this data, it feeds right on into this next section that we're talking about, which is the CQI component. And so in that CQI component, it's under section 10.1. We're really collecting the data, so that demographics, fidelity, and outcomes. And so when you're filling out 10.1, it's breaking that down, demographics, fidelity, outcomes. And those are the things we just talked about. And then we're reporting the data. So this involves participation in statewide evaluation strategy and implementation, sharing data, making sure that if we need to link what is it, the case ID numbers to cases, we can do that. This is mostly in terms of the participation in the statewide evaluation strategies and the data sharing. Mostly we're talking about actual county agencies doing that. If you're a provider agency that's working with the county, it's participating in what that county is doing. Is that an accurate representation? Anyone from Davis or CDSS have anything you want to add to that aspect of it before we get into program evaluation? Good? Okay.
You got it. Yep.
Okay. So that's pretty much the basics of the CQI component. Now we get into improved program practice, which is actually using that information. And so we're collecting the data, you're collecting the demographics, fidelity, and outcomes, and then you're leveraging that data to constantly improve your program. So it's not just about, hey, I have a lot of conversations and people say, oh, I love data, I love data. And I say, what do you love about it? And then I get a blank stare. Maybe they like the idea of data, but or they think it's all about reporting, and they like collecting the surveys and they like reporting it. Rebecca talked a little bit about this on our a couple minutes ago, but it is not enough just to collect and report the data. You have to collect and report the data, but you have all of this. To me, I would say you'd be crazy not to constantly improve your program with it. You have all of this feedback now, and maybe more than you've ever had before. Maybe you've been collecting this the whole time. Maybe you're already doing this. So if you're already doing this stuff, certification will not be difficult. If you're not doing this stuff, certification will also not be difficult because it's not really that hard to do. But you're going to have to actually come up with a plan on what you're going to do, and I'll break that down for everybody right now. But really, when I talk about constantly improving your program, it's how do I make wraparound? I'm doing wraparound. How do I make the wraparound better? How do I make access to services faster? How do I make it cheaper? I mean, that's a part of it too. How do we continually operate and be more cost effective? How do I make my organization stronger, larger? You could fill in the blank with all these different words here, but how do we, when we're doing wraparound next year, how do we ensure that it's better than now? And it's some of you have come to Annabelle and mine. We do like a 4-week CQI series where we really break this stuff down. I'm going to give you just the tiny quick version. I mean, we only have 2 hours today, and it normally the course is 16 hours. So it's 4 classes, 4 hours each. And or 3 hours each, I guess. So 12 hours. But really, it's what are the things and what is the systematic approach that you can take to say, hey, you know what? My timely engagement, am I having a plan of care within 30 days? No, we're not. And that's okay. But a year from now, can we get to the point where consistently we have a plan of care within 30 days, or consistently we have most of our kids have natural and community supports built into their plans of care? That's a measure of fidelity. So how do we use our information to say every month that goes by and every year that goes by, we're better and better and better? And so I want to show this video to everyone. The sound is always weird with Zoom. You don't need sound. I turned on sound, so I'm expecting sound, but if you don't have sound, don't panic. It's the sounds of engines running. So this is Formula One racing, and we're going to look at the pit stops that they do. And so in Formula One, which I know zero about, by the way, I don't think I've ever watched a Formula One race, but it's very interesting when I came across this because in Formula One, they're going around the track and their tires wear out extremely quickly. And so they have to go into what's called a pit stop, and their team changes their tires. So let's look at back in 1990 tire change process. Very impressive, right? I've never changed a tire that fast. It's extremely impressive. That was 1990.
So a stunning first part of the race for Michael Schumacher.
But possibly explained by how early he's coming in. You can see we've still got 48 of the 57 to go. So he's not even done 10 laps yet before making his...
Even more impressive. Even more impressive. That's 2000.
First stop, so...
Now we're in 2010. 2020. So that was 2020. One more.
1.8 seconds. Blink, and yes, you have missed.
I'm going to play that back again. That last one. Because again, you blink, you miss it.
Yes, you have missed.
Okay. That is CQI in action. That's decades of meticulous CQI looking at, and this is everything from the driver, the team behind the driver, the manufacturer of the tires, the manufacturer of the equipment to change the tires, the track system. I mean, if we're talking of system of care, now is this wraparound? No. But we're talking about a full system of care, continuous quality improvement initiative of something. I apologize if you're a Formula One fan out there, but I'm just going to say it, something that does not matter at all, right? I mean, I wouldn't even call it a sport. It's cool. I'm very impressed by it. I just don't follow it, right? But something like Formula One racing has achieved a level of near perfection. What if we treated wraparound like the United States treats Formula One racing, where we have less than 1 second tire changes? It did not happen overnight. It was, again, in this case, decades of saying, how do we get better? How do we get this edge? How do we do it better next year than we did it this year? And everybody coming together to do that. It's not just on the driver. It's not just on the people changing the tire. It's on, everyone kind of doing that. I think wraparound matters a lot more than Formula One racing. What if we treated wraparound like the US treats commercial air travel? You have a 1 in 10 million chance of crashing. That's pretty good, considering how complex an airplane is. Again, that's not because of the pilots are good flyers. No, that's the pilot, that's the maintenance team, that's the manufacturer, that's the fuel systems. I mean, it's the entire system, the air traffic control, all coming together of a lot of CQI process, a lot of people saying, let's get better and better and better and use information to constantly look at what's off and how do we improve that to get what's really near commercial near perfection. 1 in 10 million. I mean, I'm not terrified of flying, but when I'm on a plane, I think something about this just isn't right. But it's extremely safe. I mean, it's extremely safe. What if we treated wraparound like the US treats nuclear power plants in the United States? We've had zero radiation related deaths ever. I mean, to me, I would never want to live next to a nuclear power plant. I would, again, I said US. I didn't say, Chernobyl, right? I mean, they're not going to think the same way. But zero radiation related deaths ever in the United States. What if we treated wraparound like the US treats elevators, where you have a 1 in 10 billion chance of an accident? Again, same thing. You kind of get in the elevator and you're, especially a tall building, you're like, this, I don't know. Yeah, I hope the rope doesn't break or the cable or whatever it is. Extremely safe. You think the elevators don't have it's CQI. It's years and years and years of saying, okay, let's come together as a system and say the maintenance, the manufacturers, how we operate the elevators, the buildings that the elevators are in, where I mean that's almost zero. 1 in 10 billion chance of an accident in an elevator is of a failure in an elevator in the United States, right? I don't have information on other countries. But this is what I think we should all be thinking about is if we treated wraparound like we treat these things, and it's not gonna perfection's never possible, right? And wraparound's complicated. We're dealing with complex cases. But to be thinking about it in these terms and be thinking about what kind of difference would that make for the families that we're serving and these kids that we're working with, if we can just get it more and more and more effective. To me, this is why I like the idea of CQI. It's actually not because I like data, it's because I like what you can do with it. And collecting it will not do any of these things. We don't have, commercial air travel is not safe because they've collected data. It's safe because they've used information and said, hey, let's look at what's happening and improve, 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 improve. So under using data, the evaluation metrics and outcomes section, so this is section 10.2 in the standards, you're going to have to be answering these types of questions here. And again, the general overview, I kind of want to break this down, is that collected data is utilized for program evaluation and improvement at all levels, including improved practice with youth and families, improved overall program effectiveness, and improving system supports, which impacts the high fidelity wraparound implementation. Depending on the role, I mean, whether you're the county or an individual, provider, you may have a different role in that, but you're going to have to describe your procedures that ensure that data is utilized to improve practice with youth and families, including giving staff timely feedback from data or reports relevant to their service provision and using data to identify staff training needs. Data is utilized to identify and address program needs to better serve families and improve overall program effectiveness. And C, data is utilized to identify and communicate system barriers to the community leadership team, which impacts the high fidelity wraparound implementation. So really what this is are you implementing a CQI practice? Now, the reason I say it's kind of a misnomer is 10.1 is labeled as CQI, and it is CQI, but 10.2 evaluation metrics and outcomes is also continuous quality improvement. I mean, think of it as a subset of that. So you will have to answer these questions. And really, if we're talking about what is an actual CQI process in the general CQI approach, it doesn't have to look exactly like this. And there's specific frameworks out there that people like. We put this together in terms of what is a general approach that is extremely effective, which is you're selecting your outcome measure. So what is the ultimate outcome that you want to prove? Is it a dimension of fidelity? Is it, use of natural community supports? Is it effective teamwork? Is it timely engagement? So select your outcome measure, and you're going to measure and establish your baseline. Where are you at now? What is our youth satisfaction today? So let's use youth satisfaction because that came up before. So my outcome measure is youth satisfaction. You establish your baseline. What is it today? You set the target, and the target should be specific, measurable, and time bound. So let's say we have a youth satisfaction score of 60%. And we want to say we want to bring that up within 3 months. We want it to be 65%. Don't say in 3 months we're going to want it to be 100%. I mean, you could say it. It's probably not going to happen because you're dealing with teams of people that are going to have to be changing the things that they do. And there's going to be things that they need to start doing that they're not doing. There's going to be things that they have to stop doing that they are doing. And change sometimes comes slowly. So, 3 months, we're at 60, we want to go to 65 or 70 or, set that target. You're going to identify interventions. So what are the things that we need to do in order to increase our youth satisfaction? And that's going to be a lot of conversations with people, a lot of strategizing, some meetings and saying, hey, what do we think the reasons the people who are not satisfied? Well, consistent feedback that we get in comments is that we only offer appointments before 5 p.m. and, the kids are in school and the parents are at work, so they can never meet with us because all our services are from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And so people aren't so satisfied with that. Okay, well, maybe what we can do is offer services. Let's have some of our teams start, rather than starting at 9 a.m., let's have them start at 11 a.m. or noon and maybe work till 8 p.m. And now we have people providing services at a time of day where our families are actually available. And let's see, we don't know if it's going to impact youth satisfaction or family satisfaction, but let's try it because it kind of makes sense. I mean, people are saying these in the comments. We're seeing, yeah, this is happening. Let's try it. So you identify those interventions. You actually have to execute them. I talk about this a lot in my CQI class. Everybody gets to the identifying interventions part because it's fun, and then they fail on execution. I mean, every time. You can look at Fortune 500 companies. I think it's something like 80% of strategy never gets executed. And it's the same thing with human services and wraparound. So this is where I see this all fall apart, is actually executing it. Because you say, yeah, we're going to offer new times. And just because you talked about it, you think it's going to happen. No, you got to actually say, okay, well, who are the staff who are going to start at noon? And are they actually starting at noon? Or if we're going to do additional training, are we actually doing additional training? If we're going to engage in a different way, are we actually engaging in a different way? So you really should, we don't have time today to really dive into these. I think in March, we have another 4-week session scheduled of our CQI kind of series. A lot of you, I notice in this class, have been through it. It's good to see you all again, by the way. But so each one of these will break down in that class, but you don't have to attend the class to be able to get certification, of course. But in the execution phase, you should be measuring your actual execution and your actual performance. Are we actually implementing the strategies we said we were? And by the way, this CQI process, if you say, wow, that sounds kind of like a plan of care and kind of like a child and family team meeting, there's really no difference. I mean, think about how wraparound works. Your internal CQI process is really not that different. So you just don't think of it that way, but really, I mean, talk about accountability, talk about measurable outcomes, talk about all of those things. That is CQI. I mean, you're basically doing CQI with families when you're doing wraparound, right? I mean, there's a little bit more to it, and probably a more personal touch. But so you execute those interventions, and then you actually review the results. And so in looking at the results, you make a decision about what are we going to do next, and it never ends. So you look at the results and you say, hey, we increased youth satisfaction from 60, we on average score of 60, average score of now we're at 80, and hey, let's try to get to 85. What can we do to get it to 85? And you do that and you get it to 85, or maybe you do that and you're still at 60 and you're like, hey, that actually didn't work. Let's try something else. The reason I say measure your execution is a lot of times people say that didn't work. They didn't actually do it. A lot of times people say this strategy didn't work. We didn't actually do it. So let's say you're doing it. It didn't work. Try something else. And so you're constantly implementing this and you have data along the way, right? So you're getting data in the reviewing the results. I could spend an hour going through this CQI decision matrix that we put together. I'm not going to go through it today, unfortunately. I'd love to, but the basic idea of it is, let me take this pen. You first say, did we actually achieve what our target was? And if the answer is yes, you're going to set a new target, or you're going to keep your same target to sustain that and maybe improve something else. If the answer is no, then you're asking yourself, did we actually implement our intervention? And you really should have data. Did we actually execute our strategy or not? Because if the answer is no, you should be asking yourself why. And if it was something that was out of your control, you got to have a new strategy, because you should never implement a strategy that's not under your control. That's a mistake I see a lot, right? Hey, we're going to provide weekly coaching to our staff. Whenever they have a lot of cancellations, we're going to provide weekly coaching to our staff. You don't necessarily control how many cancellations happen. So if there's no cancellation, your strategy doesn't get executed, it's outside of your control, not a good strategy. You want a strategy that's going to happen no matter what. So if that's the case, you have a bad strategy. You can also come this way, right? Did we actually implement our interventions? Let's say the answer is yes. And then you can say, okay, did we get close? Did we get at least 25% to our target? Yes or no? And then you can make decisions about that too. You'll have a copy of this. Again, this is my recommendation on a really great way to review CQI data when you get to the end and you say, what else do we do with it? You can adopt it. Everybody's program is different. You can change it to what you want. But this is kind of the general idea that I think works well for CQI. Okay. Let me see if I can now clear these. All right. So improving, and let me kind of break this down for you. So let's say you say, I want to improve timely engagement. And so let's just say specifically my time to the first plan of care. I just want to take a single dimension, and I'm saying it's taking us a long time to get to our first plan of care, and I want to improve that. So that cycle that I showed earlier, which is this, let me kind of break down how that might play out in your program. So the first thing is you're selecting your outcome. In this case, it's going to be timely engagement, time to first plan of care. What's your baseline? So you measure your baseline, and let's say it's 62 average first plan of care. So it's 62 days average is what you're getting to your first plan of care, and you're going to set a target. Hey, we want to get to 30 days. What's missing from this target is I want to get to 30 days by December 31st or by February 1st. You want to have it somewhat time bound, because otherwise you're going to have this just kind of thing in the air and saying, yeah, we're working on improving it. When do you know that you need to assess whether it worked or not? You got to give yourself enough time to get it to work, but you want to have a date where you say, hey, on this date, I'm going to say, where are we at? Did we improve? Did we not improve? So 30 days average, give yourself a date, right? I apologize for drawing with my mouse. My own handwriting is not much better though. So, January 1st, right? You say you want that on there. How do we get there? Again, it's not enough to say, well, we're trying to improve it and we're collecting data and we're gonna, just think it's gonna improve on its own. It's not. You have to identify the intervention. So, well, what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a policy review with all our staff, and we're gonna document it. So, we're going to go and we're going to tell everyone, hey, the new policy, before we kind of weren't paying attention to it, but hey, times have changed and we got to get that plan of care in 30 days. So everybody's aware. So that's part of our intervention. Then what we're going to do is we're going to do engagement and planning phase training. So we're going to do several trainings that talk about the engagement and the planning phase, and what are the things we should be doing in order to have enough information to get a plan of care in place within 30 days. What information needs to go in there, what meetings should be happening with the family, what should we be doing, so that we're not just saying, hey, it didn't happen, right? So we're going to train all the staff on how to do that, and then we're going to provide weekly coaching sessions, maybe our supervisors, or maybe we have fidelity coaches. Each program is going to be a little different, but maybe you say, hey, we're going to do weekly coaching to say, hey, how is that training going? In that training, did you implement anything? Do you need help? Hey, yeah, I implemented you said with the engagement thing, I should start with a game with the family, and we can use that to kind of get, talk about needs. And it didn't work. And okay, so the coach who's been doing it for a few years says, okay, da da da, and you work it out. So that's going to be part of the strategy. So those are the interventions that in a room with a lot of conversations, I say, I think this is going to work in order to get me to that 30 days average plan of care. Then you got to execute the interventions. You actually have to do these things, right? So we inform all the staff of the policy, document it. Who got informed, who didn't, who did the informing. You have to document this because when you go back to review it, if things didn't work out in your favor, you want to know, did we actually do the strategy or did we not, right? Then you're going to train all your care coordinators on engagement and planning techniques to get to a 30-day plan of care. Again, document it and ensure weekly coaching. Whenever the coaching occurs, you should document it. Again, why do you want to document when there's a coaching session? Because if at the end of this, we said, hey, the coaching didn't work. Well, did you actually do it? Did you actually? Well, not really. I mean, it was available. We made it available for people, but it just never happened. Okay. So now we know we can't say the coaching didn't work because we never tried it yet. Let's actually, build some accountability in here. Let's add in the coaching and now let's try it again and let's continue to measure it and then we'll review it again, right? And then you review the results at the end. So on January 1st, I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna follow my decision matrix, or you can come up with your own way of reviewing it, but you should have a structured approach to reviewing it. You should always have a very structured approach to say, because otherwise you're just looking at data and you don't even know what you're looking at. So you should be saying, to me, that's why I think, let me erase all this. That's why I think that this here is a good way. Again, you can come up with your own way, but this forces me to ask all the right questions. Again, if things worked out in my favor, there's not really a lot to think about. It worked. There's usually a lot more to think about if things didn't work. Again, we talked about that concept of persistence. Don't ever think, hey, we've reached the cap. We're only ever going to get 60% of our youth satisfied with our services. If your mindset is good enough is not good enough, you can achieve quite a bit with this type of stuff. Okay. Quick note on continuous quality improvement, because the name CQI gets thrown around a lot, and the term CQI gets thrown around a lot. To me, the term wraparound got thrown around a lot, which is why now we're saying, well, how do we actually define wraparound through a set of standards? Because just calling something wraparound does not make it wraparound. Calling something CQI does not make it CQI. So data collection is not CQI. The active data collection is not CQI. I see, a lot of teams, I talk with a lot of people that say, oh, I do CQI. Really what they're doing is data collection. Compliance monitoring is not CQI. Training and development alone is not CQI. Quality assurance is not CQI. One-time projects are not CQI. What is CQI? It is, when we're talking about true CQI, it's ongoing. So it's an ongoing systematic process where teams use data to identify problems in how a service or process works, test small changes to improve it, measure whether the change made things better, and then repeat the cycle to keep improving. You may, again, with any definition, some people may have components they like or don't like. But in general terms, continuous quality improvement, ongoing, I highlighted the important words in here. Ongoing use of data, improvement, measuring whether the changes made things better, and then repeating the cycle. That's continuous quality improvement. So for certification, when you're describing how you've collected the data, now you're describing how do you actually use this. You can follow along with kind of this template, which is everything that I've gone over. But really, if you have it in place already and it's actual CQI, just describe what you're doing. And all you have to do is just describe what you currently do. If you're not quite doing this yet, you don't have to come up with anything too complex, but come up with a method. How are we actually going to implement something like this It's not going to be this big sophisticated thing, but we are going to, on a quarterly basis, we're going to select, we're going to have a meeting, and I'm just giving you an example, right? On a quarterly basis, we're going to have a meeting. We're going to look at all of our data collected, and we're going to identify one thing that everyone's interested in improving. We're going to vote on it, maybe, or we're going to have a discussion about it. And over those 3 months, we're going to implement this. We're going to, set some interventions and monitor the execution and meet regularly to review it. And then at the end of those 3 months, we're going to decide, what next to do. And so 4 times a year, we're going to have quality improvement projects to make Wraparound better. And so you would, just kind of describe that approach there. So one kind of caveat that I'll put in here, because this is important when it comes to this, is I can break up 2 methods to affect change. And the first one would be a stroke of a pen or authority. Improving working hours, improving wages and salaries, changing caseload sizes, hiring and firing people. In order for those changes to occur, it's really someone with the authority to do it says, let it be done, and it's done, right? People are gonna, hey, your new schedule is 12 o'clock, it's done. Hey, caseload sizes are now capped at 12 or 10 or 8, it's done. Stroke of a pen, they have the authority to do it, and you say it's done. The second method of affecting change is sustained behavioral changes, meaning you have a group of people that have to start doing something that they haven't been doing, they have to stop doing something that they have been doing, or they have to keep doing, something that they've been doing. But though improving youth satisfaction, sustained behavioral changes are required to improve youth satisfaction. It is not a stroke of a pen, and you're saying, hey, we're going to start acting in a way that's more customer centric and youth satisfaction. Let's go. And the CEO or the program director says that and expects that all of a sudden youth satisfaction is going to be improved. Increasing the positive discharge rate, increasing the use of natural or community supports, collecting data for WRAP certification requirements. That is not a stroke of a pen decision. It requires sustained behavioral changes in order to actually make those changes. And so what I would say is the fatal mistake to avoid is confusing one for the other. Is saying, hey, we want to make these changes and it requires authority that you don't have. Focus on something else to improve. There's a lot of things to improve. As good as your program probably is, there's always going to be something to improve. But if it requires authority that you don't have in your position, focus on something that you do have the authority to change is my recommendation. And don't assume that these are the same things. Don't assume that you just say, we're going to do plan of cares within 30 days and we're going to increase timely engagement. It's the new policy. I have the authority to say that. I'm the director and it just gets done. Oftentimes it doesn't get done because you have people who've been doing it a certain way for 10 years. They're not going to change overnight. When I was early 20s, I loved change. I'm not that old. I'm almost 40. I hate it now. I don't want to change the way I do anything. I'm happy with the way I do things. And so you have a workforce of people, you're gonna have to figure out how do you get those sustained behavioral changes if you want the outcomes to improve in most cases. So again, just to tie it all together, for certification, you're going to create your data collection plan and explain it. And it's broken out in the different steps there, but how are you measuring youth satisfaction? How are you, measuring all of these things and be able to explain it? And then once you do that, so my recommendation, if you want this to be easy, is just start with that because you're going to have to you're going to have to do it anyway, and you can't go on to the next step unless you actually have your data. So to me, what's my data collection plan? I have, you could go back to this PowerPoint, you could go to the standards. They're all just listed. How am I going to measure and track all of these things? Explain how you're going to do it. Again, Whiffy, Easy, Tom, Dart. I'm just saying, make your life easier. Then you're going to create your CQI plan using that data and then explain it. You don't have to, in your plan, say, oh, we're going to focus on improving natural supports. And this is you don't have to have a specific CQI plan. It's more about what is your CQI process. You don't necessarily have to identify, hey, this is our plan, January through June. It's what are your operational procedures for looking at the information and taking it and making it better. So it's more generalized than saying, you're not giving a specific CQI plan in your certification. You're explaining how you develop CQI plans and how you have a continuous quality improvement kind of a practice there. So that's basically it in a nutshell. So I promised I'd have time for questions, and I know there's probably going to be more than we expect. So I'm going to come off of here. And I'm gonna do you want to facilitate questions, Rebecca, or anybody else? Is that it? I haven't been paying attention to the chat, so maybe you can hop in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
We haven't had a ton in the chat, I think. So I think now would be a great time if
Yeah.
you have anything on your mind, if you want to unmute and chat with us or
Yeah. And if you drop
write some
something in the
out.
chat and we all ignored it, just drop it in again and get
Yes.
it at the bottom of the chat too, because I know there's been a lot of stuff in here. And while that's happening, I'm gonna drop in. Okay, if I have a PowerPoint that is, let me look at the size. Well, let's just try it and see what it does if I try to upload this. If not, we could drop like a box link or something like that, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, let's see.
While Tyler's getting that together, questions about evaluation, about CQI, about certification. Anybody got anything for us? Egypt.
Hello.
Hi.
I know you mentioned, Tyler, that it's okay to sample for like the fidelity pieces. Um, would you suggest collecting a baseline first of all of our families so then we have a comparative sample moving forward? Or I think some of our providers, companies are kind of trying to, get some of these policies and data collection process moving. So like you had mentioned, like some of us have been doing that, some of us haven't. So would it be helpful if we're implementing to have a full baseline from all of our families and youth?
I don't think it's necessary. I think you can get a baseline through a sample as well. The problem and the reason sampling is probably better is if you attempt to get it from, let's say you're doing the Wi-Fi and you give it to everyone and half of everyone fills it out and the other half doesn't want to do it. You have a response rate of 50%. You run the issue of developing a sampling error because there could be a systematic reason why that 50% didn't fill it out. So if you reduce from 100% and you reduce a smaller sample size and you say we're going to sample 30 people, or I don't know the program size, some programs are less than 30, to begin with. But let's say you want to sample 30% or 20% or 10% and really focus all your efforts to really get that 10%. And I mean saying, hey, we're going to give these Wi-Fis. Some people didn't want to do it. We're going to send out the experts to come and really ask them to do it and really focus in getting that response rate up. Then you're probably going to get a more representative sample. Now, if you can get a high response rate with 100%, absolutely. But that can be sometimes harder to do depending on the size of the program. If you're a program that has like 8 cases, yeah, you can get them from all 8. I would say, but it's not necessary for a baseline. You can establish a baseline with a sample. Make it a random sample though.
Right.
Don't let people pick what families are gonna, get selected. They're gonna pick the easy families that they know are gonna complete the survey. And the families that are giving people a run for their money may not, be selected if people get to self-select. So yeah, for sure make it random if you're gonna sample.
And do you know if, like, if you're using Wi-Fi Easy through the RapStats system and you're doing a random sample, like let's say you're in multiple counties, will that random sample pull, like, try to pull some from each county so you
Yeah.
get a more, it will, okay.
Yeah, so in RapStat, if you're using RapStat, it sets it up as a hierarchy. So you could exist as a single entity, as like an agency, and then you have multiple sites and locations that you can run things for. And so you can say, I want to do sampling separate, and you would have each county do its own sampling. And so it would get representative. And then if you have multiple care coordinators or facilitators or case managers, you can stratify the random sample across them, meaning that each person gets sampled once before somebody gets sampled twice, right? Everybody gets first before people come and get seconds. So it allows you to have more representative sample while still keeping it random. And it's really what you do is you put in all your clients and then it'll handle all the sampling for you. It's pretty great. With the Wi-Fi, it also has features where you can actually dispatch by email or text message the surveys to the families, and it goes right to their phone and they can complete it.
Thank you. One other thing,
Yeah.
in terms of considering data, would you, because I know a lot of what you talked about were connected specifically to the fidelity standards, but like one of the things I've also been thinking of is assessing like staff turnover and pay and like some of those things and how those also may impact some of those. Like you said, if we're having high staff turnover in a specific area and then we're seeing satisfaction go down, like
Yeah.
is there additional data, I guess, that you would suggest we consider or think about that could help
Yes.
magnify that lens, I
Yeah,
guess?
employee satisfaction. I mean, if you think youth satisfaction matters, I promise you, employee satisfaction matters as well. I mean, if you're an agency or provider where people love working for you and they love their job, not everyone's going to, of course, but in general, um, the level of service provided is going to be better. And so stuff like turnover as well, I mean, is related to satisfaction in some degree, I think. But with turnover, again, if you have a workforce and the average person's been there 8 months versus a workforce where the average person has been there for 4 years, what's a better level of service that you're able to provide people? So is it important? Absolutely. And if you look at um, really the dimensions of CQI in relation to wraparound, it's the actual service, the provision of services, your own operations as an agency, as an organization, your own operations, stuff like staffing, effectiveness, turnover, things like that, and then system of care in general, looking at how um, kids who move have continuation of services and they don't have to start all over again. How is that kind of idea improved? So at that level as well. But yeah, absolutely. The retention, the attrition, the turnover, it's a great CQI that you could implement. But in terms of wraparound certification, you can absolutely talk about that, but make sure you include how you're going to be also doing stuff related to more direct service delivery as well, because that's important as well.
Thank you.
Did something happen to the PowerPoint? I had somebody say, can I drop the PowerPoint again, please? Is it not able
I
to be?
downloaded it. It checked to work it. I just reposted it as well.
Okay.
I was on my phone, and so I was trying to download it on my phone, which I did, but I couldn't send it to myself. So I hopped off my phone, jumped on my laptop, and when I went to the chat, I wasn't able to see any.
Oh, the chat reset on you? Yeah, I'll drop it in again.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, great questions so far. Anything else we're seeing in the chat or anything that I've gone over that you want me to go over again? I'm happy to. This Excel sheet, while you're thinking about it, if you have a question, this Excel sheet, let me just kind of go over it because I dropped it in the chat and I want to give everyone this caveat as well. So let me share. This is what I dropped. I had screenshots of this throughout the presentation, but if I said I don't have a really good system, I just need to track all this stuff, you could absolutely do something like this. You're welcome to take this and modify it. Again, for your program, everybody's program is going to be different. And again, just saying we're going to put the persistence score in an Excel sheet. That's not enough to describe how you're measuring persistence. How do you measure whether there's an outcomes-based process? And then, this is just allowing you when you actually do it. If you want to have something because you're like, hey, we're not, I can't update my software system or I don't have a software system. To me, this is like, it's like no excuses, right? At bare minimum, you can always do something like this. In this tab, I have these measures here. And again, I will get this out to everyone. I don't know if Rebecca, we have a list of everyone here today. I'm back and forth with them having conversations about this. I didn't want to not talk about it for the training. So, consider it a preview. I think it's mostly on point. Maybe a question around persistence is there and a couple other things, but take it with a grain of salt. It's mostly accurate.
And we can, I think easier for us because of size and accessibility and all the things, we'll post all materials with the recording of this on our website and you can check back. And then if they get updated, we'll go there and update it as well. We could potentially send an email blast out. But like trying to email directly to participants here does get tricky because we'd be using our larger list here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sounds good.
Yep.
There was a question I saw about
yeah.
cans. Do anybody want to talk about that? Rebecca?
Sure. So cans is coming. If you're not using it already, you should be, right? Cans is a great outcomes measure. It absolutely informs what you can do. And so that's a great data point to start collecting, getting used to using. I think it's really good place to start when you're looking at data and outcomes. We have some places in the standards where we're calling out like, hey, you have to use the cans, here's where we want to see the cans. For the data, it just is a easy way to say, hey, you already have to do the cans. Why not use it to help you measure outcomes, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, absolutely. And the nice thing, I mean, I like that the CANS is a multifunctional tool. I mean, you can use it for assessment. You can also use it for outcome measurement. And again, similar, you know what we should have done is we should have, that might be a good update to the matrix with the University of Washington tools. What are the things that the CANS can and does measure? And just kind of put, start building out kind of like a list of here's the scale, and this is what it kind of gives you as it's mapped to the California high fidelity wraparound standards. With the CANs, yeah. Are we at the point of, because there's nothing in the standards that specifically indicate cans, but there is a standard for cans that exists outside of the wraparound standards, correct?
both. There's a couple of standards in more the practice side where we've called out like in your plan of care development using the cans, right? So speaking to like the teaming and planning aspect of it. For data, no, it's not saying you have to use the cans for data.
But you can.
Larger child welfare, behavioral health, right? The movement is we're all going to use the cans. This is our communication tool and planning tool for all of our programs in the system of care. So moving in that direction. But in the standards, it's really more, we call it out as a practice and as a planning tool. And then I think it just makes it a nice, easy outcomes things. With all of that, the word of caution is cans can't be your only plan. So it can't be the only mechanism for identifying needs in a plan of care or strengths, what have you. It can't be the only data collection you do either, right? We're looking for, because it doesn't do wraparound fidelity or wrap specific outcomes. I'm gonna post as soon as I can find it and grab it. I'll post the National Wraparound Initiative has a nice little handout sheet on kind of using cans and wraparounds and pros, cons, what's the difference. So I'll post that in a minute for folks to see as well.
Yeah. There was a question in here from Lainey. How do you record gender identity that oftentimes changes with adolescents during your time working with them? Yeah, so things like the date of birth is not going to change. but there are certain data points that can, and you really make a judgment call on, do we go and just update our record, or do we go and we record the history of it? So for me, in this example, if that happens in the data sets that I manage, if someone's gender identity changes and they say, at intake we recorded them as female, and now they're saying male, or they're saying non-binary or something like that. What I do is I'll just go and update the record, and it really reflects that that's what they are and always have been. You could, for example, something like living situation, what's their living environment and where do they live? I'm updating that with a history of the dates. So I'm saying, January 2nd, they were homeless and they lived in, the city of Sacramento. And on February 5th, now they're in foster care and they live in Monterey. And now, and I'm tracking that history because I have a use for it. So for something like gender identity, if you have a reason or there's some type of utility to saying I'm going to track all of those dates because I need to know what they identified as at certain points in time, then absolutely nothing stops you from doing that. For me, I've never found a reason. I've never needed to use it for anything. So I just say, hey, if we want to update that, let's update it. I don't really care what it was before. And it's not that it doesn't happen. It's not common enough where it really affects any metrics year to year or anything like that for me. So that's kind of my approach to your question. It's a really good question though, because any one of those things you have to decide, do we want to track the changes or do we want to not track the changes?
I saw a question in the chat about 18 months update around high fidelity wraparound. And so I think you're speaking to high fidelity wraparound concept paper DHCS, which is separate from what we're talking about here today under the wraparound certification approval for aftercare wraparound or CDSS. So I'm putting in a link in the chat to DHCS's website with the Center for Excellence. UC Davis has been named the Center for Excellence for wraparound. So at some point, we'll be providing all kinds of technical assistance and training under the Center for Excellence. That is we're just in the announcing phase and the planning phase of that. So coming soon, see it in the future. In the meantime, if you want to look at those, at what's going on for the Center for Excellence and stay updated, there's not much of a wraparound there yet. So if you're looking on the behavioral health side and, oh, these updates are coming and what does this look like? We don't have any answers for you here today, but there's DHCS's website. You can stay tuned on what those updates will be and what that'll look like. And then for kind of everything we've said here today, just really want to focus and narrow in. We're talking about California High Fidelity Wraparound under approval, certification, California Wraparound standards with CDSS and DHCS partnership here as well. Thanks, Bill. So stay tuned for those high fidelity wraparound questions. Any other questions? All right, we'll give you all a minute to think. Oh, Egypt, come on in.
I guess the other piece, I would just love to hear any feedback you have, Tyler, on how to really situate a data person within our companies. I think often, like you said, data is not just collecting it, right? It's like how we use it. And so finding, working to share the valuability of having someone who is a data analyst or that really knows how to not just collect, but utilize the data and report it out and share it in meaningful ways that is often that is accessible and understandable to everyone is really important. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on what that looks like to meaningfully integrate a role like that into our wraparound provider care.
That's a really great question. It's a hard sell to tell the people who control the money, hey, we want to create this new position, and it's not an entry-level position because you want to bring someone in who's done it. I mean, if you have the budget for it and you really want to get launched quick, bring in somebody who's done it and done it well. But my recommendation, and if anyone has other people, whether you're Davis or CDSS or just another participant here who does CQI that wants to chime in after my answer, I'd love to hear other people's opinions as well. My opinion is if you're just getting started, carve out 25% of someone's role who already exists and understands the business, the organization, and who already knows everybody there. Because the thing that makes this difficult for the data person is you have no authority over anything. And so if we're talking about the CQI initiative, sometimes the poor data person, he or she says, hey, we're doing all these things, and people look at them and say, okay, yeah, I'm not doing that. And nobody supports them. And so if you really want to launch this from the beginning, and you can't just say, we're going to bring someone on, to get it started, somebody who exists and make it, again, 25% of their job. They're taking 1 day a week or 2 days a week, and maybe it's an administrative person, maybe it's a supervisor, maybe it's a care coordinator who understands the organization and knows everybody. Because a lot of what they do is a lot more influence and less authority over things. Now, you should also make sure if you're going to set this up, whoever does have the ultimate authority is supportive of what they're doing, and it's not, hey, we got to do this because CQI, quality improvement says we have to do it. No, it's, hey, as a team, we're coming together, and this is the initiative we want to do. And there's no us versus them. There's no data versus program. It's all within the organization in terms of establishing a really solid culture. I would not give authority to the data person. You're going to create a monster, right? Don't give too much power to the data person. But let them be supported by someone who's not the data person, that it's really important for them that these things start to happen. But if you have that role, that 25% is saying, hey, I'm going to take on this tracker. We've never done this before, but I'm going to track it in Excel, and this person's going to email everyone. And the person with the authority is going to make sure people are answering those emails and saying, hey, you don't ignore our data person. When they email you, this is so important that this happens, and you have to kind of have teeth in stuff from the person with actual authority over everybody else, right? To really say, I mean, if I have authority over authority, supervision, whatever you want to call it, right? If I say, hey, we're doing this, and somebody's not doing it, then now I have the ability to say, hey, are you on the right team? You might be on the wrong team, because I said as a team we're all doing this, and you're not, doing it, right? You're supervising someone. So then you can kind of start to expand that role from 25% more if they're feeling like they're very busy with it. Because the worst thing in the world is bringing on a new position and it's like they don't have enough to do, because it takes time to kind of ramp that up. So that's my recommendation. If I don't know, does anybody else in here? We only have a couple minutes, and I always like to end on time. But if anybody has other you know, thoughts on that, who's either started that or been a part of it, or anything like that. Bell, has a comment. We're looking for salary comparisons for data people. Any suggestions on advocating for higher pay than entry level? That's the challenge. What are my recommendations? Well, if you can make the sales point on what the deliverables are in terms of financially saving money or increasing efficiency, or, things like that, you can make that case. But yeah, try to make it as a business case. It's often, the people who do control money, they have to make sure everybody gets paid every month, and they have to make sure that the bills are paid and everything like that. And so it is going to always come down to money and things like that. But yeah, it's hard to get more than sometimes entry level people, for sure. If you figure it out, Belle, let me know.
Absolutely. And I'm going to just pop in real quick to say we're launching our evaluation. We have a poll that should have flashed up on your screen. If you don't see it, you should be able to find it on the bottom bar. So we ask that you please fill this out. We always read them. We do take feedback seriously, and we do adjust accordingly. So if you can take a few minutes, let us know how this webinar went, start filling it out. Tyler and I will certainly hang on. I see Jared, I see your hand up. So we will we'll keep answering questions, but just want to highlight out, if you can fill out that evaluation for us, we appreciate it. Jay, what's your question?
Yeah, mine was just a quick comment that, like, prior to like Olive Crest having Awesome Tyler supporting this project, we in Riverside County had a wraparound training collaborative, which was none of it. We didn't have people, but what we did is have child welfare's outcomes data unit that we met with regularly, and we used our local systems outcomes measurement to bring together all of our wraparound data and then give us feedback. And then we fed that back into the system and we constantly kept that measure. So I just want to throw out there that, like, it's really great if you can get your data person, and if so, get a great one. And if not, don't let that be the barrier to stopping you,
Yeah.
because you guys can capture this data within your local system of care somewhere, somehow.
Yeah, that's a great point. Good to see you, Jay, by the way.
You too, brother.
All right. On that note, it's 11 o'clock. We're right on time. Hang out, finish filling out the eval. We'll hang out as well. And then once your eval's done, you're free to take off. It was super great to see everyone.
Yeah, thank
Great
you so much,
questions
everyone,
today.
for coming.
Absolutely.